fellow developers, writers, and everyone who loves game design.
Welcome to DLC Not Included, our weekly podcast where we discuss game development, the industry, and everything in between.
We're your hosts, Steele
and Teal. Glad you could join us.
Oh man, 6 episodes into the revival of our podcast.
It doesn't feel like it's been 6.
It's crazy, but it feels so good. So for anyone who's watching us live during our recording, do recall we are not monitoring chat, but we will be looking at your questions during the question phase at the end, and it is just a smidgen amount, 50 channel points to ask a podcast question, which will flash up on our screen. That's 15 minutes of watching, not much time at all. We have a heck of a topic for you today.
It's a doozy, and It's choosing your game engine.
And this is actually a lot more technical than usual. We're going to try to keep things as layman-termy as possible.
We try to break things down for all of you guys because, boy, is it intense.
This is intense. So let's just get the 2 questions out of the way that people are probably going to be asking. First off, what is a game engine? Well, if you're asking that, you might be listening to the wrong podcast. So a game engine is literally just an application that houses a bunch of tools, a suite of tools, and it's geared specifically to creating a video game. So it's not the same as like a software library for, showing a PDF or something. It's made specifically for game development. This can include things like a renderer. That's the thing that lets the player see the game, an animator to create simple to complex animations, a physics engine to simulate real-life physics, etc., etc., etc. Game engines, you really need to have them. There once was a point back in the day where you could just code your game in assembly, C, QBasic,
right,
whatever. Nowadays, you really need a game engine in order to make a complex game. But that begs a second question, doesn't it, Teal?
Yes, it does. I mean, should you build your own engine?
Should you? Right.
Look, if you had the know-how, the time, and the resources, hey, you may want to consider building your own engine because doing so will give you complete control over your game. And that's really important for a lot of us developers, is having that level of control over your functionality and other things.
The game itself and how the game shows up. However,
most people aren't going to want to reinvent the wheel. I mean, there's already engines out there. So, for sake of ease, why build your own when you can just get one? So, that's something you need to answer from the get-go.
Exactly. And we had to get those 2 questions out of the way because a lot of times people will ask us, should we code our own engine? The answer is, if you can, you have time and the ability, yes. Even if you don't end up using it for your game project, there's a lot you can learn about what happens in a game engine under the hood by creating your own.
Oh, yeah.
And you can get a DirectX library and just go to town. It's a fantastic exercise. However, again, do not reinvent the wheel if you don't have to.
Right. So let's assume that you're going to go out and look for a game engine.
Yeah, we're going to either purchase one or download a free one, etc.
Right. And it doesn't matter if it's 2D or 3D at this point. We are just talking about the thing that drives your game.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about core features.
Right.
What you should really focus on.
When you look at your game engine, and we're going to kind of take this in segments like we do for all our podcasts. Right now we're talking about what to look for in a game engine, and those core features are super important. If you're going to do anything with your game engine, you need to have these things at the top of your plate for consideration.
Yep.
And the first one that we feel is the most important is the rendering engine.
Oh, that is the number one thing. It's how the engine shows everything on the screen, all of it.
People have a misconception that computer programs just make stuff appear, and there's actually a method behind it.
Yes, there is.
There's 2 main methods. There's a ton of them, and I'm not going to go over all of them
because there are more than a dozen.
Way too many, and they're all math intensive, but rasterization is one of the big ones. That's where you take an object described in mathematical equations like points, a line between 2 points, or a triangle like a polygon.
Right.
So you take these objects described in math and you turn them into pixels. That's rasterization. Most of a lot of your 3D engines and just about all of your 2D engines use a method of rasterization.
Yeah, it's pretty much a backbone of engines nowadays.
It is, and has been like forever.
Yep.
Forever. Then there's ray tracing, which is another big one, especially nowadays with your RTX cards and such. But ray tracing has been around forever.
It's become kind of a sexy term to be bandied about because, ooh, ray tracing.
Right. Quick side note, the ray tracing that RTX cards make sexy is ray tracing things like shader reflections and such.
Yeah.
However, ray tracing is literally just something, usually the camera, casts gazillion invisible lines, and every time they hit something, it creates like a pixel point or some thing that represents the object.
Right.
So you have like your little coffee cup, and your rays come in from your camera, and a million of them, and each time they hit a part of that model, the program knows to light it up. So that's just the two, you know?
Yeah,
I mean,
that's the two main ones. I mean, there are other rendering methods,
but you want to think about them, you know, and these can intersect. I think rasterizing engines and ray tracing engines, they all can keep. But the thing is you want to keep in mind how the engine takes the game information and puts it on the screen, because that's going to be determinant on what type of game you're making.
Yeah.
You don't need to go into an engine that has fancy ray tracing with a gazillion, that's a technical term, shaders, if you're going to be doing a pixel art game. By the same token, if you're trying to go for an ultra realistic 3D game, something that rasterizes may actually cut down on the graphic quality. So these things have to be thought about. There's just a lot of other things to think about too. You got to look at like reflections, depth of field, transparency, translucency. There is a difference. But all of this is stuff that when you're looking at your engine, like let's say you go to the Unreal Engine marketplace, you know, look at Unreal Engine, or you go to like Godot.
Yeah.
And you take a look and see, how does this engine handle depth of field, Z buffering, all that stuff. And you want to look into that and kind of go, okay, now I have a column by column comparison of how the rendering happens. I have a better idea. I need something that's going to be faster and get those graphics out more quickly with a more streamlined pipeline. I know I'm throwing out technical terms, sorry. Then I need something that's going to make beautiful flashy graphics all the time.
Absolutely.
So you got to think about it.
So in addition to rendering, because we could go on all day about rendering.
Yes.
But there's another core feature you really need to concentrate on.
Yes.
That's your audio. How does the engine make everything sound?
Right, because
you know?
Teal and I are always talking about how important audio is in a game. It is vitally important. It makes or breaks your game.
Right. So you have to look at, can your engine produce sound within what we call the game source direction, the in-game source direction. Right. So for example, there's a babbling brook, and depending on where you stand, that's where you hear it, you know, coming in.
Right.
Or, you know, does it just pan, you know, all over?
Left to right.
Left to right, right to left.
Right.
Or can it change the volume based on direction and distance, such as that babbling brook? I mean, how detailed, how much do you want that sound to make a difference in your scene? And
depending on the type of game you're making, having a directional engine where if your character is facing forward and that babbling brook is to the right, the engine knows to cast the sound in that direction.
Right.
That's going to be different than, logically speaking, if you're standing 12 pixels to the left of the brook, the game knows to pan a little bit on the right channel and increase the volume as you get closer. Those are two separate logics.
Yes, they are.
And depending on the type of game you're going to create, you need to consider that. But you also got to consider, can the engine produce the Doppler effect?
Tell them about the Doppler effect.
The Doppler effect is, well, I mean, the best way to describe the Doppler effect is when you say something and you're close to someone and they hear it at a different frequency than the other. You know, so if I'm right here, I'm about maybe 4 feet from Teal.
Right.
If I say something here, she's going to hear it at one frequency. If I say the same sound closer, she's going to hear it at a slightly different frequency. The Doppler effect is the distance from an object, the frequency changes. It's highly mathematical. I know that, but you have to consider, can the engine do that?
Yeah.
Can the engine naturally produce things like echo, reverb, delay, flange? Now, like, who does flanges?
There is nothing for me to do.
Oh, I just said it. Yeah, that was the trigger word for our Alexa.
Yeah.
But yeah, can the engine naturally handle that stuff?
Yeah.
Can the engine naturally change the pitch and speed of the sound in real time? You know, and pitch and speed are two different things. Pitch is how high and how low it goes. Speed is how fast it goes. Some engines only do both, where if the pitch is changed, the speed is automatically changed.
Right.
And you need to know, can your engine do one or the other?
Do you want it to do both at the same time, or do you want it to do one or the other?
Exactly.
Or maybe neither.
Right.
Maybe you don't want either of that.
Right. Maybe it's just unnecessary.
Mm-hmm. And also think about what formats does the engine use?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Like MP3, which you want to stay away from.
So MP3 is extremely popular. It was popularized back in the late 90s, early aughts.
Yes, it was.
Remember the whole Napster debacle? Mm-hmm. It is a highly compressed, lossy format. That means that the sound is highly, highly compressed.
Yes.
And while it's fantastic for your MP3 player when you're out jogging, it's going to give you a fidelity loss.
Oh boy, it does. You can tell.
And you probably want to go with something a little more lossless. Lossless means uncompressed.
Right.
So like a wave or an OGG. Wave is like the way to go. Because it's analog it's digital analog.
It's digital analog.
It's a waveform that's uncompressed. But let's go beyond audio.
Okay, so beyond audio, let's talk about physics.
Physics engine.
You know, what is it that it's within the engine that makes stuff bounce?
Right.
You know, think of the bouncing ball, boing, boing, boing.
Because yes, you can animate your ball bouncing.
Yes, yes.
But it's so much better if an engine just handles that. You give properties to your ball, and your ball hits the ground and it bounces a certain amount with a slight decay each bounce until it stops.
Yeah.
So most people in the 3D game world will understand this term that I'm about to use. But if you're a 2D developer, you may not have heard of soft body versus rigid body. And you have to question whether or not your game engine can use either or both. So quick tutorial, a soft body is like a model or a sprite that can change its shape to some extent or a lot whenever a force is exuded upon it.
Right. Whereas a rigid body is models and sprites that just don't change that much, if at all, when a force is applied to it.
Right. On a very technical level, think of a rigid body as like a plane model. Like you have a 3D model of a plane.
Yeah.
And the distance between the nose and the tail, the fuselage, they're never going to change. No matter how the thing is rotated, orientated, no matter how much it moves, that distance between the nose and the tail is always the same. That's a rigid body. A soft body, well, let me put it like this.
Okay.
A soft body would be a curtain that moves when you throw a baseball on it.
There you go.
And a rigid body would be the baseball you just hit the curtain with. That's the best way to think of the two. Physics engines handle both differently, and you need to know if the engine you're going to use can handle it the way you want to. If you don't have Tapestry's cloth physics at all, if you don't have anything like that, soft bodies aren't necessary.
Right.
But if you're going to have that, or fluid dynamics, you need to think about that. So we could go on and on, just like rendering, we could talk about physics engines all day long.
But that is definitely a core feature you want to look at is what do you want out of the physics of your engine.
Absolutely.
And I really want to bring this up as another core feature because this has been emerging during the past decade, and now it's really come to the forefront. Artificial intelligence,
yes.
AI.
Game AI. We did a creator classroom on that, and it is very detailed.
Yes.
So just for those of you who need to catch up on the terminology, when we talk about game AI, artificial intelligence, we're not talking about HAL 9000.
No.
No, not at all.
As nice as that may sound.
Right,
no.
right. It's literally just a long, complex series of algorithms that provide a direction to anything not controlled by the player. The game engine will have its AI engine run these series of algorithms and formulae over and over again, whether it be friendly, hostile, it doesn't matter.
Not
it
really.
Doesn't matter. It's going to then figure out what the best move for those non-player things are. And I
Right.
say non-player things because they don't have to be characters. We've talked about how sound can be driven by AI.
Yes, it can.
Lighting, all of that. How complex, ask yourself this, figure this out. In the engine you're going to use, how complex is the AI? Does it do anything more than just chase or run away from you? You need to know that, because if you want to have these complex AIs for your enemies, etc., even if it's a turn-based RPG,
Right.
you're going to probably want something that can do more than just move towards and move away. You're going to go through all these little features and algorithms and determine what's the best thing for the enemy to do.
And just to build on your point, Steele, about that, you also want to know can you write or rewrite the
Yes.
AI in your engine?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
is it hard coded into your engine and you
Right.
just work with what you got,
Right.
or do you have the ability to customize and rewrite your AI? Can you change it completely?
Exactly.
Because some engines do and some don't.
Some don't. Yeah. How intelligent is the default AI? Does it learn your players' patterns, or do you have to write that in? Does it remember what the player has done, or do you have to write that in? In other words, look at the artificial intelligence that the engine comes defaulted with.
Yeah.
And ask yourself this, as a developer, is that enough, for me to take this base AI system and modify it as I need to? So add those layers on of,
Yeah.
okay, it knows how to go towards, it knows how to go away. Now let me do a check to see how far the enemy is,
Right.
how far the player is, that kind of thing. Or do I need to get into the nitty gritty? And that right there will determine whether or not the engine can meet your core feature of AI.
That's right.
Those are the core features. You need to consider those. We have more, and these are very important.
These are what we felt were, they weren't core features per se, but there's things that you want to look at as well.
Really heavily.
One of them being programming language.
Yes.
Okay.
The anathema of people who don't like to program.
Well,
You're going to need to make some modifications of your game at some point. And
yes.
programming languages are still and always will be the absolute best way.
Yep. So you need to take a look at what language does your engine support.
Because if it doesn't support it, and if it doesn't support any language at all, our advice is to run. It doesn't have to be anything particular. It can be C++,
Right.
C#, JavaScript, Lua script, Python. Just as long as it's a language.
Yep.
And it can be a scripting language.
Sure.
Does it work directly with a low-level library? Like DirectX.
Like DirectX, yeah.
Can you do that? Those are really powerful. Now, scripting languages, I talked about that earlier.
Yeah.
We like those because they make it a lot easier, don't they?
Actually, they do. They make coding a lot easier.
Oh, yes.
And if you know a certain language, let's say you know C#, let's
Right.
say you kind of dabbled in it, you're going to want an engine that supports that so that you can, have an easier job with your coding.
Right. So
make tweaks when you want to make tweaks.
You're talking like a C script.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So instead of having to go in and actually do the C# itself, which we always recommend learn C# or C++.
Yes.
They're very similar. They're very powerful. But a C script's going to make your job a lot easier and a lot faster. But then there's the type of scripting that we like, especially Teal. Teal loves this next type of scripting.
Visual scripting.
Oh, yes.
And I'm going to bring it up. The Unreal Blueprints.
Absolutely.
To me, okay, I'm just going to say Unreal Blueprints
They're
is
amazing.
a total godsend.
It is. And there's others. There's Unity,
Yeah.
Bolt, etc. But the nodes in Godot. But if there's a visual scripting language, that makes your job so much easier. However, still learn what the backbone is.
Please
because
do.
If you have to get into the nitty gritty, it's good to know, hey, with Unreal, the blueprints are great, but you got to know C++,
Yeah.
et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Here's a question. Can you touch the game engine's code? Is it open source and you can touch this?
Yeah.
Because if you can touch and modify the source code of the engine, that gives you an unparalleled level of power.
That's going back to what we were discussing before, is how much control,
Right.
how much do you want to just really be the one to get in there and customize your stuff.
You need to ask that.
Yep.
You really do. And what internal libraries and debugging tools are available for your engine's programming language?
Oh, yeah.
Let me draw a parallel here. Okay. Debugging tools and internal libraries of some engines allow developers to get in there and see how their game is messing up.
Yeah.
Because as we talked about in our previous podcast, testing your game, you need to know how your game is messing up. The halo effect, halo testing, the 9 yards. However, there's some engines that don't have very good debug tools. For example, one of the engines that we deal with regularly, the RPG Maker engine, the debug tools there are not very good. So because of that, a lot of the community is asking, how do I do X? How do I do Y?
Right.
I'm trying to do X with my system and it's in my game and it's breaking. So how do I fix it? If there was a stronger set of debug tools for the RPG Maker engine, it might be easier.
Right.
To do that critical debugging. Now, just because the debugging tools don't exist or aren't that strong, that doesn't mean the engine's bad.
No.
A strong support community can definitely make up for that. But you as the developer need to ask that question. What does the game engine provide that lets me test and fix my game?
And how important is that to you?
Yeah.
Honestly, if your game is let's just say it's a 2D pixel art, basic platformer, you probably don't want all that debugging,
the bells
stuff.
and whistles.
The bells and whistles, yeah. You can get by with just asking folks, hey, I've got this problem. What do I do?
Or having a simple, an error return with a code and going, okay, so this error here means that we have a collision issue, etc.
So just ask yourself that. Let us talk. I want to get to this next point because, we've seen how this messes up a lot.
Oh, yes.
And it's called networking.
Yes.
Like, how does your engine connect to your network?
Right.
Okay. How does it handle what we call replication?
Let me explain
for
replication.
games. So, explain replication, Steele.
So replication is, the best way to describe it is, if Teal and I are playing a game, and an on-screen NPC walks towards me, Teal and I will see the same NPC looking the same way, walking in the same direction.
Yes.
It's replication. And if an engine does not handle replication well or at all, it probably doesn't need to be used for an online game.
Right. Or multiplayer.
Right. Yeah, even multiplayer LAN, it's probably going to mess it up.
It's going to mess it up.
And if it doesn't do replication at all, it really can't be used for multiplayer.
Right.
However, having said that, most engines that have some sort of programming language allow you to do a multiplayer. You can do multiplayer in RPG Maker.
Yes, you can.
You just need to have the right plugins on top that allow the connection and the replication. So it's important. What's also important is the engine only capable of client to client? Client to client would be like a LAN party, for example, where we're connected to each other. There's no server, and our engines are replicating everything on my screen and her screen, and we're playing our whatever game. Or is it server-based?
Right.
Which is absolutely necessary for MMOs and larger games.
Yeah, because at that point you're plugging into the server.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you need to know, can your engine handle this? And if it does, what's that maximum load?
Yes.
Find that out. You do not want to be deep in the development of your 100-player, battle royale game and find out that the engine can't really handle more than 50 people on a server.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah, that would be rough.
Your beta testing for load is not the time to be looking at my engine.
Yeah. Load testing is not when you see if your engine has a limitation on stuff. That's whoo. Okay, so there's other things that are important, like user interface creation, UI.
The UI, yes.
Can you actually create the UI in your engine, or does it happen with a third-party tool like Photoshop? Now, this is the reason we list this under very important, is because it really helps to be able to see the UI while you're making the game and not have to go and load up the executable every single time, to see it in the editor.
Right.
Seeing that overlay, it really helps, because then you can get the placements right. You can see if the UI gets in the way of cinematics or information like, let's say you're doing a turn-based RPG, one of our favorites. If the UI is getting in the way of an important battle or sequence, an action sequence, you kind of want to know that. And if you're doing it in the editor, if you can create your UI in the editor, you get a better view of that.
Yes.
Than waiting until it comes in a bug report. So think of it like catching an issue during development.
Right.
Yeah. Can you tweak it? Can you tweak it in real time?
Tweak it in real time, yeah.
Things like that. Shall we talk about cross-compatibility?
Yes, that's another thing you want to look at. How well does your engine integrate with other tools?
Yes.
Do you have to purchase certain proprietary tools that only work with that engine? Or can the engine just connect to pretty much any tool? I mean,
that the industry uses, right? Like, oh heavens, what are some of the ones that we've talked about?
Well,
let's do an example of not done well and done really well.
Okay.
So not done well. Again, we're not picking on the RPG Maker engine, but it is a good example of proprietary. Highly proprietary.
It's very,
So RPG Maker works mostly with Degica tools. There are a few non-Degica tools that work with the RPG Maker engine and work well. However, most of them are, by the company, Degica.
Right.
So that is an example of it proprietary. And because it's proprietary, you know, getting into using the RPG Maker engine, you are forced to use Degica primarily.
That's right.
An example of one that's done well.
Right, and that's Unreal.
Oh, yeah.
Because Unreal can pipeline with, let's see, Real Illusion.
Yeah, those are the people that do like Character Creator 3, iClone, etc. So it just pipelines right in. Just you do something in the Real Illusion suite, any of it, and boom, just you hit a button, it exports directly to, I think it's a PBX with the animation already in there, and there's your character. And you can make your character do whatever you mocapped or whatever you've modeled, or it's there, it's done. So that is an example of cross-compatibility.
Yeah.
And when you're looking at your engine, you need to decide how important is it that I can connect this engine to other tools.
Right.
Or am I okay with being in a proprietary format? Again, there's no right or wrong answer. These are questions you just need to ask yourself.
Now, some features that are important but not vital that you want to take a look at, just to see.
Right.
Acceptable formats.
Yes.
For your images, your music, your sounds.
Right. If you're going to have problems getting 32-bit PNGs, you probably don't want a engine that requires only 32-bit PNGs.
Right.
If you aren't going to be able to use Ogg Vorbis for your audio, you probably don't want an engine that only works in that.
Right.
So you need to think about those things. Does your sounds, are they AIFF or WAVE or what? You need to know these things. So when you're deciding on your game engine, take a look and see what the acceptable file formats are.
Yeah.
Make sure you understand that.
Because that's what you have to work with. And here's another one, Cinema Engine.
Yeah. Does your game have that?
Crafting your in-game cinematics.
Yeah. How many times have we, TL, started to make a cinematic for any game?
Yeah.
And be grateful when it does have a cinematic engine that just lets us turn that feature on and start moving the camera around and select the depth of field, etc., as opposed to moving everything bit by bit by bit.
Yep.
Yeah. It's not vital, but it's really nice. It saves a lot of time.
It saves us a lot of time. For us, that was an important feature that we looked at in our engines.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another real good one is the packaging. People don't think about that. How easy is it to get your game to your players?
Yeah.
Whether it be uploading onto Steam, going onto GOG, itch.io, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And also versioning. People don't think about versioning.
But versioning,
super, super important. Because you're going to update your game after it goes gold, and if it's really difficult, if you got to repackage your game, runtime and all, and upload it all the way, i.e. you can't patch your game, they just have to download a new version of your game, that's going to create a problem.
Yeah, it is.
Your players are going to be like, why am I downloading a 2 gigabyte file every time I want to update my game?
Yeah.
So think about that.
Think about that. And also think about the community support for that engine and for the developers that use it.
Yes. The stronger the community, the more tight and the more expansive the community. I know that sounds oxymoronish and paradoxical, but you want tight as in well-connected and friendly and helpful, and then expansive as in really big, so there's a lot of people to help. A huge pool of community resources.
Right. So, hey, an example of a really robust supportive community is the RPG Maker community.
Exactly. One of the best out there. I know that the engine does get a lot of heat, but the community is absolutely top tier.
Yes, it is.
Very supportive. So ask that. How important is that to you, the developer? There's so much more, though.
There's a lot more.
All day. We need to move on to the next main topic.
And that is middleware.
Which most people...
So what about middleware?
Most people don't think about middleware, Teal. They really don't.
And this is not a made-up term.
No, this exists. Let me go ahead and describe what middleware is, and then we can kind of talk a little bit more about it. So middleware is an application that integrates directly into the game engine. Like my favorite example is SpeedTree.
Yeah.
SpeedTree was used during the creation of the Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion to make the foliage, the grass, the trees, etc. You recall in that engine, that stuff is not placed. People aren't placing trees. They're not placing the grass. It's procedurally generated by SpeedTree.
Yep.
And it is absolutely awesome. Another one, also used by Bethesda, is... Which one's that?
Bink Video.
Bink Video. We talked about that earlier today when we were putting the podcast together. We were like, we need to mention Bink Video.
Yes, because MP4.
Yeah.
Yeah, it displays movie files like MP4.
Right, MP4.
Right
MDK.
Inside the game during runtime.
You cannot have the entrance to Fallout 4 without Bink Video.
You just got
can't. You can't. Another great one that we love specifically is Nvidia GameWorks.
I love Nvidia.
You really do. And their physics, their fluid dynamics is so good. And if you're running it on an Nvidia card, mwah.
Yeah.
So middleware is often overlooked, especially by new developers. They overlook it literally all the time. It cannot be overstated how important middleware is. Seriously. It can save you a ton of time that you would normally spend, and money. Yeah, because you would be over purchasing plugins, etc., or rebuilding the wheel, reinventing the wheel.
Yeah, so if you can find an engine that's compatible with middleware, you've just made your job that much easier.
That much easier.
Yeah.
It really is. It's a time saver. Cannot overstate it. So we just wanted to, before we move on to the big one, which is talking about game engine recommendations, we wanted to make sure that we mentioned middleware because you as a developer should try to be aware of it.
Yeah.
And see what's there. So let's actually go into this. We're going to talk about some game engines, and we're going to make recommendations based off of them. Now, we need to preface everything we're about to say. There is no one perfect game engine.
No, there is not.
It does not exist. You need to choose one based on your need.
That's why it's so important for you to do your research into core features, important features, middleware. Because this engine is what is driving your game.
Your game can be made or broken by choosing the right or wrong engine for your game. Do not try to make a game that doesn't fit your engine. It will always cause you heartache. So
let's talk about some 3D engines.
Yeah, we're going to go about like 4 or 5, right?
Yeah. And Unreal Engine 4.
We'll start with that one.
Let's start with Unreal.
We will admit, full disclosure, we are biased to it, but we're going to say where it lacks as well as where it's good.
Yeah, because we realize its limitations.
Yeah. So what are the pros of the Unreal Engine?
Okay. Well, I think it's very powerful.
Oh, super.
Okay. It's rich in features. It's massively well known. It's supported. It's got this robust store and
the marketplace.
The community. It's got blueprints,
which is like the best visual. It's the best visual scripting language out there, in my opinion.
Just our opinion. Yeah. It's got free content. They have once a month.
The Unreal Christmas once a month, first Tuesday.
Yeah. They merge seamlessly with middleware.
Lots of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's like one of the really cool things about it.
Like Quixel and I think Bridge, and I'm probably mispronounced. And I'm an Unreal developer, and I'm probably going to get roasted for getting these wrong. But there's a lot of third-party software that it directly integrates with.
Yeah.
And a lot of times Epic will buy out a company and make sure that middleware connects directly into the engine or third-party integrates through a pipeline. That gives a massive lead for any developer. And Unreal is really best for large projects. It's not exactly the greatest for small ones, but it can do almost anything.
Yes, it can. But there are some drawbacks using Unreal. Let me tell you, guys, it is extremely resource intensive.
Yes. When we were looking at one engine we wanted to settle on, one of the things that turned us away from Unreal until we finally decided to go with it is it's a resource hog.
Yes, it is.
It will eat your CPU and your GPU for breakfast.
You are going to have to invest in a development rig.
Yes.
This is not a gaming rig.
Right.
A developer rig is built differently.
Hardcore on the memory. Hardcore. You need to load as much as you can into memory and be nice to your hard drive.
Yes.
It also has a lot of a learning curve, quite a learning curve.
Big learning curve. You know, I'm still boning up on some of the stuff in Unreal. Boy, that's a lot.
It is a lot. You got to get used to it, especially if you've never worked in a 3D environment before. It's not hard, but it's rough. The shaders, the material editor, that takes time. You're going to spend a long time learning how material editing works in Unreal. And here's something underneath the hood. It runs on C++, not primarily on C++.
It runs on C++.
Which is not a bad language, and I will never talk ill of it. However, I recognize C# is a more up-to-date, more streamlined programming language. So under the hood, it has this bit of antiquatedness.
Yes, it does.
Backwards compatibility is always sacrificed for streamlined.
Yeah.
So that's the Unreal Engine. Let's go to the next one.
Okay, so usually when you talk about Unreal, you're also going to talk about Unity.
Pretty much. Let me go over the pros for this one.
Yeah, okay, you go for it, because you did a lot of research on Unity.
We did, because
honestly.
we almost went with Unity. It is extremely easy to pick up and learn. The learning curve on it is really short, especially if you're used to 3D in general. You can pick up Unity very quickly. It has an all-in-one editor, probably one of the best editors I've ever seen. It makes use of C#, so it's got that streamlined under the hood thing going on. The user interface is so friendly. It can get busy, but
it can. But that was one of the things I really liked about Unity was its UI.
The UI is awesome. You can create, render, and run games just as well as all the big boys, all the Cry engines, the Unreal engines. Unity can play in the big boy yard.
Yes, it can.
Absolutely can. However,
unfortunately, with Unity, the documentation is not as good as some other engines. And let me tell you also, the animation and material editor at this time is just not up to par with its rivals.
No, it's not. No, that doesn't mean it's not catching up.
It is catching up, but right at this point in time, it's not.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And the renderer is also not as up to date as it should be.
Right.
This may change in the future, and I hope it does.
I guarantee you it will, because Unity wants to be able to be on par with the major engines out there. And it is a fantastic community out there. Unity developers are just great people. The community is fantastic.
Yes.
The engine needs to continue maturing, and it will.
It will.
However, we have to fully disclose at this time, Unity, while it can play with the big boys, it has to struggle to keep up.
Yes, it does.
Speaking of the big boys, here is an interesting. This one snuck in. We've heard of it prior to its explosion in popularity, but Godot.
Yep.
I was shocked at how powerful Godot has become. Let's go over the pros, Teal.
Okay, well, Godot, first and foremost, is free and open source.
You can do what you want with it.
Yep, you sure can. It has a node-based workflow.
Yes.
And if you don't know what that is...
Node-based workflow is kind of like blueprints on steroids. I mean, you literally can say this object, and then you go from this object's node. Okay, we have my car here. Now let's see what happens when I go forward. Boom, go to the next node. And then it hits a telephone pole. Boom, next node. It is like really strong, what you can do with the node-based editing in Godot.
Oh, it's very flexible.
Super flexible.
Oh, yeah.
Super flexible. And the community.
The community support for Godot is, it's amazing.
It really, I mean, we were shocked when we started looking into Godot. We found out about Godot from watching other developers who we're friends with talk about it, and we started getting into it. We're like, holy shit, it's a good engine.
It is, and and I jumped in on one of the community boards. And when we were researching it, I asked questions, and people were just, instead of snarking and whatever, they were answering my questions and pointing me to other resources, and it was awesome.
It's very obvious that the Godot community wants Godot to succeed.
Yes.
However, the learning curve for Godot is really steep.
Yeah.
Especially if you've never used a 3D engine before. Do not recommend Godot being your first 3D engine.
No.
Just don't do it.
Don't do it. You won't understand.
It is going to take a lot longer. Get 3D under your belt.
Yeah.
Work in Unity or another engine and then jump to Godot.
Right.
However, the power of the engine is not there yet. It's just not. It's getting there.
They're working on it. But
it's just not there.
Yeah.
It can't do what some of the big boy engines can do. It wants to. Like, Godot is the little brother who wants to one day be as good as Senpai. But it's not there yet. It will be, because the development community as well as the support community and just the whole thing, they're going to do it. It's just going to take time.
Yeah, we're talking about core features.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So, but let's talk about the
my goodness.
the Cry engine.
This is one of the biggest of the big boys. We are always going on about the Unreal Engine because we love the Unreal Engine. However, this engine cannot be understated for its sheer power.
Boy, that you talk about a Corvette.
Oh my gosh, it has some of the most powerful, if not the most powerful, graphical capabilities of any game engine.
Yeah.
Everything looks smexy. It's gorgeous.
Yes.
I cannot overstate how beautiful this engine renders everything.
Yeah.
Just everything.
You talk about, like, people like to Raytracing.
Yes.
The new sexy word, right?
Yeah.
Raytracing. Man, what it does with Raytracing.
Yes.
No other engine can do that right now.
Absolutely amazing. So it can do most things graphically that other engines, including the Unreal Engine, can't even dream of.
Yeah.
So con. Let me go over the first con.
Yeah.
Okay. Actually, let me go over a con that needs to just be stated. Like the Unreal Engine.
No, like
the Unreal Engine, Cry Engine will murder your resources.
It certainly will.
And it devours. It just kills your memory.
Yeah.
But there's a lot more to it than that. It's not for beginners.
No, it's not. It has a very steep learning curve.
Yeah.
Wow. And unfortunately, along with that steep learning curve, there is not very good documentation
not compared
available.
To other engines.
It's very poor.
Yeah.
Wow. And there's just a teeny tiny community. So you're not going to have very much support or learning or anything with this. It is difficult.
You are on your own, and if you're doing a project that requires CryEngine developers, good luck finding them.
Yeah.
However, if you can manage all of those, your game is going to look god tier.
Yep,
amazing.
It certainly will. You'll have an amazing game.
So beautiful. Okay, let's go over one more engine in the 3D department before we move to 2D.
Okay, and it's probably one that a lot of folks haven't heard of.
Yeah, it's one of those ones that it comes out and then it fades away.
Yeah.
And then it comes out and then it fades away. And that is
Amazon Lumberyard.
So we can't talk about 3D engines and not mention this because it's the little engine that could. It keeps wanting to do better and it keeps doing better each time.
Yeah.
It adapts seamlessly with Amazon Web Services. So the online experience one can accomplish with Lumberyard is unbelievable.
Yeah, and if you're wanting to do an online game, that this is something you want to look at.
Is such a flexible engine. There's so much you can do with it. It's really easy. It's super easy to learn.
I'd say it's very beginner friendly.
Super beginner friendly.
Yeah.
We haven't played with it outside of installing it and kind of looking at it and going, wow.
Yeah.
But you can pick up Lumberyard really fast. Also, and I think this is mostly because of Amazon, the technical support. Now, we're prefacing technical, not community.
Right. Technical support is, it blows everything out of the water.
It is one of the best we've ever seen.
Amazon uses its extensive resources, its technical side, to support this engine.
Yes. But with that comes the issue of this engine comes and goes, and goes.
Yeah.
And because of that, when it comes to community support and learning how to use the engine, the resources are very scant.
Yeah, unfortunately.
And the community of developers, not technical, are very small. They're very new. Not a lot of people use Lumberyard. And the engine itself is in its infancy.
Right. Because as you know, it starts and stops. And so, you may get a version of it and use it, but
it's not going to have all the things you want it to do.
And don't expect an upgraded version anytime soon either.
Yeah, it's funny. Whenever a new version of Lumberyard drops, also the installation breaks. I mean, it's got issues.
Oh yeah.
However, like Godot, one day Lumberyard will be amazing.
Because it does focus on online games.
Yeah, that AWS experience. So one day.
Yeah.
One day. But not today. Shall we move?
Let's move on to 2D engines.
Let's do it. We specifically are going to mention 3, but when we're done, I'm going to kind of give a lagniappe on a 4th one.
Okay, yeah.
That's kind of, but not, but it's awesome anyway.
Yeah.
The first one is kind of like the big boy in pure 2D development, although it can do 3D, and that's Game Maker Studio.
Yeah, which we've used.
We've used Game Maker Studio, and then there's Game Maker 2. I mean, they're just really good 2D engines.
Yeah.
They're perfect for a 2D game in terms of resource management, rendering, pipeline, etc., etc. It can do 3D, but it's really meant for 2D.
It is specifically focused on 2D projects.
It does 2D super well. And maybe that's part of the problem is the conceit that comes with Game Maker Studio because it's so good as a 2D engine.
Yeah.
The cons are almost weird.
Well, first of all, good luck trying to upgrade it because it is expensive as heck.
Yeah. It's like, I think $1,000 was one of the upgrade prices.
Yep.
It's like, who's going to pay $1,000 for an engine when other engines just throw free upgrades at your face?
Yeah, exactly.
And I know it's because the engine is so good, the creators of it are like, well, we can get away with this, but it's I don't want to say it's exploitive, but it's very close.
Yeah, very close. It's right there at the line. Yeah.
Now, there's another issue that I have with Game Maker Studio, and that's the language. The programming language. It's proprietary.
Yeah.
You're not going to learn programming using Game Maker Studio. You're not going to learn C Script. You're not going to learn C Sharp. You're not going to learn Java. You're not going to learn Python.
No.
You're going to learn Game Maker Studio scripting language.
Yes, you are.
It's a powerful language. But how does that help you?
But it's specifically geared towards that one engine. So,
and that, as a developer, that annoys me. It really does. I want to be able to learn, hey, give me Python scripting. Okay, it's not the world's most powerful language in terms of game engines, but it's highly versatile. Give me JavaScript, one of the most powerful languages out there. Don't give me whatever the heck it is Game Maker has. And its upgrades, they alienate the user database.
Yeah.
The user base, yeah.
Just upgrades. They're not fun to try to deal with.
No, especially when you got to pay for everything. Now the next one we have scant experience in, but we did review it specifically for this podcast, and that is
Pixel Game Maker MV.
Yeah, it's in the Maker category.
Yes, it is.
So let's talk a little bit about it.
Okay, so this is extremely simple to learn and use.
Yeah.
Okay, you can just, it's almost, and I don't want to say it is, but it's almost plug and play.
Almost.
Okay. It's very powerful, especially for 2D adventure games and those action RPGs.
Yes. It does something called objects, which everything is an object. Like your character's an object. The tree you just jumped over is an object. The mushroom you just jumped on and squashed is an object.
It's all an object.
And you put them together through a construction. So it's object construction.
Yeah.
And that's things like movement, animations, etc. And it's actually it's deceptively strong.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
So you would think, okay, well, this game engine should be widely used. Unfortunately, debugging is virtually non-existent. Sorry.
Yeah.
If you want to try to troubleshoot and debug your game and it's built in Pixel Game Maker, boy.
Yeah, it's like,
good luck.
So I turned it on and I jumped on a mushroom and my character exploded. What happened? You got to hunt it down.
Mm-hmm.
And you'd think, hey, that's fantastic. I'll just learn how to use the engine. Well, guess how you learn how to use the engine? It's
the tutorials, man.
It's heavily tutorial reliant. Now, again, nothing wrong with tutorials, but if you're not the kind of person who wants to go through tutorial after tutorial after tutorial,
then this engine's probably not for you.
It's not.
Because you are going to be hitting the tutorials pretty hard.
Yes. The next engine is something near and dear to us because we've played around with it literally forever.
Yes.
And it's gone through multiple iterations, and you probably know what we're going to talk about.
RPG Maker.
Yep.
And right now they just released MZ.
Yes.
But a lot of us are still using MV.
Yes.
So RPG Maker, MV, MZ.
Let's talk about it.
And we all love it because it's extremely simple to learn and use. And it's very, very powerful. It's pretty much the go-to engine for your JRPGs and turn-based RPGs.
Right.
It just handles them so very well.
Hence the term RPG Maker. It has something called an eventing system. And Teal loves that. I'm talking for my wife. Teal loves the event system. She does. Let
me just tell you something. I've used the eventing system for years on this thing.
Yeah.
Doggone it. It is deceptively powerful. Okay?
It is.
Is. I can't say enough good stuff about it.
You can do things with the eventing system and common events and such that you didn't even think you could do. And
you can make some amazing stuff with it.
You really can. And we've talked about the community.
Massive supportive community.
Very much so.
If you're new to making games and you want to make an RPG or JRPG game, this is a really good starting point for you,
100%.
RPG Maker, because the community is very helpful.
It is.
There's lots of tutorials online and forums and discussion boards.
There are YouTubers and streamers that focus specifically and exclusively on RPG Maker.
Yes.
So while it's you can find an Unreal tutorial YouTube channel very easily. You can find a Unreal or Unity streamer. There are a plethora of people in the RPG Maker engine, and because it's such an easy engine to use, the community's. However, but it's not without its flaws.
It's every engine has some drawbacks.
That's right.
And RPG Maker is infamous for its bad resource management.
When we say that, we mean like CPU usage, memory usage.
Right. It is heavily reliant on tutorials.
Yes.
Okay.
It does. It is. You really need to just follow the RPG Maker tutorials over and over again, especially if you're not used to the eventing system, etc.
Yeah.
There's a underlying problem we have had with RPG Maker forever, and no insult to the community, but it does not promote critical game development skills.
No, it's pretty much show me how to do it, and I do it. I'm just going to follow these set of stereo instructions. If I want to do this, then I do this, and this.
Right, and unfortunately,
doing without understanding doesn't make you grow as a developer.
Yeah. Sometimes you need to have an engine that teaches you how to be a better developer other than how to do certain things in your engine.
Yeah.
And RPG Makers, I would say outside of the resource management, the biggest flaw is it does not promote you to be a critical thinking game developer.
Yeah.
It just doesn't. And it's not terrible. Again, RPG Maker and Pixel Game Maker, if you want to just jump into it and you've never touched 2D game development before, pick one of those two.
Pick one of those two. You'll be churning out games, and with each game, and we always say with each game you make, you're going to get a little bit better and better at it.
And
at making a game using that engine.
And if you want to jump into 3D, go to Unity.
Yeah.
That's our recommendations are Unity if it's your first time ever jumping into 3D, and RPG Maker or Pixel Game Maker if it's your first time jumping into 2D.
Right.
And then from there, branch out to more complex engines, which you always need to do. Here's your lanyap. If you want to do 2D and you understand how the 3D version of the engine works, consider using Unity 2D. It is extremely powerful. It is a high-level pipeline.
Yeah.
It is very good at resource management. It is very user-friendly. You can learn how to use Unity 2D just as quickly as Unity.
Yeah.
And churn out some amazing stuff, pixel art or otherwise.
Right.
However, you want to understand how Unity works. So our recommendation, and the reason we are mentioning this last, is learn Unity and then jump into Unity 2D.
Right.
You'll have that kind of jump start.
Because you'll have a good base.
You'll have a good base.
That's pretty much what you should do is, hone your base skills.
Exactly. While we go to kind of a wrap up before questions, start getting your questions ready.
Yes. If you've been watching, remember to use the poll question feature that we have in our chat.
Yeah, that way that podcast question hits us. We'll see it on the big monitor here. We'll be able to answer.
Yeah.
So while you guys are getting ready for that, there's sort of I want to go over it's kind of a fundamental theory. Okay. Theoretically speaking, you as a developer should never stick to one engine.
No.
Ever. Don't do it. Move around, learn new engines.
Because you always want to learn and grow. You want to stretch your wings. Get comfortable using different engines, and the world will be at your feet. You'll be able to design games using a multitude of different skills and best practices.
That's right.
And you'll be a lot more versatile developer.
Each time you as a developer learn a new game engine, you are increasing not only your repertoire of skills that you can use, but you're also increasing your critical, there's that word again, your critical understanding of game development, because every engine handles game development a little differently. And you have to adjust yourself as a developer to each new game engine. So as you jump from one engine to the next, you're finding that you're relying less on how do I do X, and as opposed to how is X done.
Exactly. And ultimately you'll make yourself a lot more marketable as a developer.
And once you learn those skills, you'll find that no matter the engine, when you come across a problem, you'll be able to solve it. Doesn't matter what the engine is.
Yeah.
Okay, so now it's time for us to take questions from our live audience. We will give our live audience a few minutes. Remember, it's that podcast question feature, right?
That's right. Hit the poll question feature.
It's a little picture of a slime with a treasure chest.
Yes.
50 channel points, and you can ask us a question. If we don't see one in a few minutes, we'll, of course, just end the podcast. But for now, let us go to... really, I mean, if you had one that you had to recommend, Unity for 3D and Pixel Game or RPG for 2D, would you say from there it would be easier to just jump to just about anything, like as a base? As
a base, yes. As I said, you want to develop your foundation first, develop those foundational skills in programming.
Yeah.
And then you can jump to a more complex engine after that, such as, Unreal.
Right.
Or Game Maker. Yeah. Something like that.
Yes. Okay, so we have a podcast question.
Oh, okay.
We have a question from KV. I'm still trying to understand the concept of middleware. Is Effectseer considered middleware? Effectseer is a third-party program, third-party application that can work with a engine, whether it be 2D or 3D. It's a particle system generator. That's a third party. A middleware is something that integrates directly into the engine. So let's say, for example, for those of you in the RPG Maker community, doodads.
Yes.
Yanfly's doodads. That would be a middleware. It's a plugin, but if it was its own standalone application, it would be a middleware.
Right.
Anything that when you open up the engine, it's already there and you can use it, even though a third party created it, that's a middleware. If it's something you use outside of the game engine and then port it into, that's a third party.
Right.
Even if there's a pipeline connection between the two. Like Effects here is with RPG Maker MZ. Okay, so we have another question. This is from Human. Can you talk about the ease of getting free resources over the different engines? Some non-artists rely on free resources.
Right.
The engine that absolutely beats everyone in free resources is Unreal.
Yes.
It doesn't even come close. And I know that the RPG Maker community loves to talk about their free resources. They don't even come close. The Unreal Marketplace gives stuff away. The amount of, I think, like Paragon, Infinity Blade, a couple of other games that they've just given away all the resources.
Yeah, they have.
Just all of them.
And that's on top of having their once a month giveaway.
Right, right. And then adding things to their perma-free little group. So Unreal is the best for free resources. As far as 2D engines go, RPG Maker is the big boy when it comes to free community resources.
Yeah.
Because everyone just pixel arts and then throws it up on one of the forums, etc. Unity's got some good free resources as well. You're not going to see a lot of free resources for CryEngine or Game Maker Studio unless it's a pixel art that you can use.
Yeah. But you have to be able to port that in.
You have to have the licensing ability, and a lot of people don't like to create, hey, here's my piece of pixel art that you can use for all the engines. They say you can use this just for RPG Maker or Pixel Game Maker. So to kind of wrap up Human's question, the easiest ones to get, 3D Unreal, 2D RPG Maker.
Right.
Okay, our next question, good questions by the way, everyone. Our next question is from Burke.
Okay. Burke says, how do you feel about the engine related to the scope of your game? Yes, we did explain an example with Unreal Engine having issues with smaller projects, but I mean, GDD influenced engine choice.
Right.
Also, we may need to try Smile Game Builder as it's an isometric RPG maker, but I'm too tied to UE to move now.
Yeah, we know Burke is a Unreal developer.
Yes.
So there's a lot to unpack with that question, so give us a second. Engine related to scope is important.
Yes, it is.
Try to find an engine that matches your scope. Or at least, if you can't do that, try to find an engine that matches the scope of your development lifeline. How long are you going to develop? Or if you're going to do a bunch of small 3D projects and the Unreal Engine does everything you want it to do, you're probably okay.
Yeah.
Maybe it's Unity if you want to be able to throw together prototypes super fast. So it's, yes, while there is a measure of choosing the engine related to your scope, you do want to think one step beyond just the first project. Think about the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth, the epic story you want to tell.
Right.
Smile Game Builder is also deceptively powerful. However, it needs to grow. It's had a lot of growing pains. Some of the people in our community who Studio Blue are friends with has communicated with the devs and has made the engine better because of suggestions.
Right.
However, all new engines need to grow, and Smile's no different.
Yeah.
Smile's no different. We own Smile. We bought it during one of the Steam summer sales. It's a great engine.
I think it's a pretty good engine.
But it needs work.
Yeah.
It needs time. Okay. Good questions, everyone.
Thank you.
So let's see.
Human has a question. Do you think the reputation of respective engines has a big impact on games' acceptability? In other words, will a bad engine reputation harm a game's chances of success?
Okay, so
yeah,
let us go ahead and address the white elephant in the room.
Yeah.
Because there are a number of people who listen to our podcasts live and offline who are members of the RPG Maker community. The RPG Maker engine has a bad reputation, not because of the engine.
Not because of the engine.
But because since the engine puts things out, allows you to put out games so quickly,
right,
there is a plethora of not good games.
Yeah.
Basically games that are viewed as trash. And when you get that and compare that to an engine that's very easy to use, other developers may see it as a trash engine. we will die on the hill of defending any engine that's been put together professionally.
Yes.
And that includes RPG Maker.
That's right.
So, yes, 100%. The reputation of an engine and the games that go with it go hand in hand. And if an engine has been known for putting out bad games, regardless of how good the engine is, the engine's going to get a bad rep.
Yeah.
And then that cycle is going to be, now if the engine has a bad rep, people are going to be less likely to deal with games that come from it.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not fair. It's not right, but that's how it works.
Yeah.
And the best way to fix that is to have consistently good games come out with that engine over and over again to show that, yes, while there's bad stuff, good stuff is just as capable.
Yeah.
There is nothing wrong with any engine. It's about how it's used.
Yeah, it's how it's used and the perception that it builds with the products that are released using it.
Yeah.
So
Okay, we got another question. Good questions. All right, so this is from KV.
Okay.
All right, you mentioned earlier that RPG Maker does not promote critical development skills. What could RPG Maker do to address this? That is a very good question.
Wow, that's a good question.
Do you want to field that one, or do you want me to hit it?
Because it is a proprietary engine.
Yeah.
And this is difficult to just jump in and answer because it is solely owned by one entity.
Right.
And that one entity controls everything about the engine.
And they specifically want it to be a plug-and-play engine.
Yes.
Super easy. That's its selling point, is anyone can make a game in the RPG Maker engine. That's its selling point.
So, given those parameters, I don't see it in the immediate future here promoting critical developer skills, because it's not meant to do that. It's meant to plug and play. Let's churn out some fun games for people.
Now, I will say this, and this is a thought on the fly, so I don't know how well it would work. But if Debugging Studios, are the ones that created RPG Maker, if they put out a pro version
Yes.
that was more on the game dev pipeline,
Yeah.
okay, and focused more on teaching those critical skills as opposed to click this button, click this button, do this, and added more power, like RPG Maker Pro,
Right.
then it would. And that's something that Debugging could do if they wanted.
Yes.
So you'd have the basic concept of RPG Maker, but you would have that deeper scripting level that something like Game Maker had. That would be, and I personally would jump on that.
Yes, I would too. That would be a lot of fun to develop some good games with. It having a pro version, and it'd be great to also do videos.
Yeah, tutorial series.
Tutorials.
I would
do a streaming session of developing using that engine. That would be really cool.
I would jump all over that.
Yeah.
The chance to do if they made an RPG Maker Pro, I would jump on that. All right, if we have any more questions, let's go ahead and hit them out.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we're going to go. These have been very good questions, very thought-provoking.
Yes.
We love each one of you guys, and everyone who's watching us live and everyone who's watching us, on VOD. You guys have given us absolutely amazing feedback. Do you have any last thoughts on your end, honey?
My final thought is, choose your engine based on your project, not the other way around.
Yeah.
Okay. Sure. Let's just say that Unity is fun and easy to use, and a lot of people say, yeah, do it. But if you're twisting and turning and pretzeling your game to fit Unity, you're really not developing a game. You're just farting around in Unity.
Wow. Yeah. I agree completely.
So pick your engine based on your project, what you want to see, what is your vision.
Yeah. And then once you get your vision, and this is just developer 102, once you have your vision as a developer ready, then go ahead and choose that engine like Teal said, and make the two work together.
Yeah.
And that's really all you need to do. That is, you as a developer need to do that. And your game is going to come out amazing. Just absolutely
Yes,
amazing.
it will.
So, All right. Thank you, everyone, for showing up. You guys have just been unbelievable. If you're watching this live, we love you guys. If you're listening to this on VOD, on iTunes, Spotify, etc., wow, you guys just make this so much fun.
Yeah, leave us a comment.
Yeah,
let us know what you like or what you'd like to see.
Yeah, if you have... Oh, wait, we have another one.
Oh, we have a last minute one. Okay. KV's asking this for Rack.
Okay.
What are critical skills that are missing?
I'm going to assume that's about the RPG Maker engine. I'm going to assume
Okay.
that. And if we ask the question incorrectly, try to catch us offline.
Right. We'll be happy to answer it offline for you.
So the RPG Maker engine is pretty much just you click a button and something happens, and you're more figuring out how to do a thing.
Yeah.
How do I make my RPG character teleport? How do I make them jump across a chasm? And while that's important, it's more how to on a single task level than how do I script a good scene? How do I force my cinematics to come out in a way that are compelling? So it's more on the broad strokes than the minor details. Again, you can do it in the RPG Maker engine. We have seen RPG Maker engine games that have been unbelievable. However, it's not the engine that promotes it, it's the developer.
Sure, and just to expand on what Steele said, knowing how to do a specific thing in that specific engine is not, it's not, you're not looking at why.
Right.
Why does this happen? Why are you able to do this or not able to do this?
Right.
You've got to move beyond I click A and B happens.
Right. You got to go.
You need to know why it works. How does it work on that theoretical fundamental level?
Why should I click A and have A as opposed to click B and have B?
Why should I click at all?
Right. Why should I click at all? So, very good question, Rack. Very thought-provoking. And thank you, KV, for helping.
Yeah,
looks
thank
like
you
there's
for that. Yeah.
a small issue with the podcast question feature, and we'll fix that for next week.
Sure.
But we're going to go ahead and go for now. We love you guys. Thank you so much for stopping by. So join us next time for DLC Not Included. And remember,
anyone can give you the key, but you have to go through the door.